What's up everyone, it's Justin here. If you're new to the channel, I'm a doctor here in New Zealand and I help students learn and manage their time more efficiently. And when I work with these students and coach them on how to be more efficient, there is a certain trend that I see pretty often, and that is that students have often tried and heard of the Pomodoro technique. A lot of students have. The Pomodoro technique, for those of you who aren't familiar, it says that you use a 25-minute work block followed by a 5-minute rest block. And you just repeat that cycle and it helps you focus a bit more. It was developed by this college student in Italy who was studying and found a tomato timer, like a tomato timer, like to cook tomatoes. And it had 25 minutes on it, and he just decided to use that as a timer, and it works. And I've used it a lot myself, and my students have used it a lot, and it is effective. But the problem is that we are too caught up by the fact that it is effective to really examine why it's effective. And that's actually a lot more important for us because it's not always effective. And so what I find is that a lot of students will have used this technique and they find that it's useful. And then when it's not useful, they're more like a potato than a tomato.
I'm a potato.
And what that means is that we have this binary sort of split where you don't know when exactly you can use it and when it will work. And then at the same time, you're not entirely sure why it doesn't work. So you seem like it's just like this magical kind of random technique that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't at all. And that's very inconsistent, and you can't really plan around that. You want to have a consistent level of focus that you can activate when you need it. We're going to be looking at the reasons why the Pomodoro technique actually works and how we can actually extract the principles from the technique and actually modify it so that it works even better. And I think you'll find that learning about the principles behind why the Pomodoro technique works in the first place is going to be more valuable for you than just using it by itself because it offers a lot more flexibility. So as usual, let's see what the research has to say about this. And one of the key areas that I want to draw your attention to is this idea of attention residue and how it impacts on performance. So this study looks at task interruption and how time pressure can have a role in mitigating the effects of interruptions. This is something that I've talked about in previous videos as well, where when you start a task, your attention and your focus is dictated by attention residue that's left behind by the previous task. And you need to completely clear that all away in order to start the new one. It's the same for when your computer is loading a web page. It might load really slowly the first time, but then when you refresh, it loads almost instantly. And this is because your computer has saved a copy of it in its local cache. And so it's loading it from that cache every single time. You navigate to a new page and it loads slowly again. And so our brain is much the same way. When we focus on a task, there is a sort of cache that's kept in our brain. And if we switch from one task to another task, then it has to rebuild that cache. And it dumps the previous one and has to rebuild this new one. And then if we go back to this one, we have to dump this one and then rebuild this one. So there's this delay between developing focus and staying in flow because our brain is constantly trying to play catch up. So this is why multitasking is generally not recommended at all. You want to focus on one thing at a time and just do it properly. So the Pomodoro technique works because the time pressure actually reduces that attention residue. And it does that in actually two ways. The first way is at the end of a task. Because we've got a time pressure and we know that there's a break coming up, our brain is primed to wrap up that task cleanly so that we can go into our break. And it means that in that break time, any lingering attention residue can kind of be cleaned up, ready for us to resume onto the next task or resume back into this task again. The second benefit is at the beginning of the task. Because of the fact that there wasn't attention residue lingering from the previous one, our performance on the next task is not impacted by that. And indeed, what the research does show is that the time pressure mitigates the effects of attention residue, and therefore performance does not suffer. But there's actually another benefit that Pomodoro technique offers, and this is really to do with how time pressure affects our ability to be distracted. Now, I've said it time and time again, focus is actually a really complicated thing. There are a lot of different factors that influence focus. Your distractibility is one of those things. So if you're studying in a really hectic environment where there are a lot of distractions around you, a portion of your brain's resources are used to prevent those distractions from affecting your focus, which means there's less brain resources available for you to focus on the task at hand and get it done. The Pomodoro technique kind of cages your brain into this sort of temporal cage, right? There's a time pressure forcing your brain to have a sense of urgency and artificially increase the level of focus that it can generate. And it's a very quick, easy way to increase your level of focus just by adding an arbitrary time pressure onto it. And you can use this transferably across pretty much any activity. Now, when we look at research that's done with digital distractions, we know, and I don't think we needed research to tell us, but we can see that there is a very high percentage of people that get interrupted and distracted while studying. 73% had irrelevant browsing in this session of university students. But those under a high time pressure exhibited a lower task distraction rate, which means that they are just getting distracted less frequently while they're, in this case, studying. And that has another benefit, because every time you get distracted, you are kind of moving on to a new task, which is therefore reducing your ability to maintain that flow, and your brain is going to have to rebuild that cache yet again. So there are 3 different stages of benefit that the Pomodoro technique has. It creates a clean beginning to something where your brain is ready to go and it can activate flow state very quickly because it's primed to do so. It has a low level of distractibility and increases your focus during the event itself. And at the end of it, it allows your brain to wrap everything up and consolidate it so that there's less attention residue moving forward. In summary, what that means is that your brain no longer has to really think about all these different things and move in all these different directions. It can focus in more single-mindedly at a particular activity and just get that done at a high level of efficiency, which is generally what we want all the time. But there are actually some key limitations to the Pomodoro technique as well. And this is the thing that stops a lot of students from being able to use this technique more effectively. And that deserves a video all on its own. So check that video out. And then once we've figured out why the Pomodoro technique doesn't always work, we can actually combine the lessons that we learned from both of those things to create an alternative to the Pomodoro technique that works even better, featuring all the benefits of the Pomodoro technique without any of the limitations. And this is the system that I use and the one that I teach to most of my students. And to this day, I haven't found a student who actually uses this technique and does not find it effective. But I'm curious to know, do you use the Pomodoro technique? How do you find it? Does it work well for you, or is it limiting for you as well? Leave a comment down below and make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the YouTube algorithm push my videos out to more people so I can impact more students like yourself. But as always, thanks for listening, stay efficient, and I'll see you in the next video.